Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George, and with me, as always, some of the best MMA minds in the world. This week, we got Mike Bond out in Toronto. Proud to call him a colleague for almost a decade now. The man is a workhorse. Goes from MMA Junkie Radio here in Las Vegas. We banged out 3,254 podcast episodes as of today. Check us out on MMA Junkie Mondays and Thursdays. Danny Segura, who runs South Florida, in my opinion, like the Miami Hurricanes of the 1980s. And, of course, behind the scenes, one half of the dynamic duo. It's Cold Coffee on the ones and twos. Let's get to it. This past Saturday, boxing champion Tyson Fury knocked out Dillian Whyte to retain the WBC heavyweight title. 94,000 and change in attendance at Wembley Stadium in London witnessed that boxing match, which ended with a 6th-round KO via uppercut. Afterwards, UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou was brought into the ring by Fury, a pair of them acting amicably, I might add. Fury then mentioned wanting a hybrid fight between the two of them. Ngannou also added, quote, "We are going to find out who the baddest MFer on the planet is," unquote. He used another word. Fights like this are talked about quite frequently, but I ask, did seeing them side by side in the ring create a buzz with you guys? Or could this be the kick in the butt that the UFC needs to sort out Ngannou's contract situation and lock him down? Talk to me, fellas. What are you thinking? 4 minutes are on the clock. And Mike, you start things off.
Yeah, there's obviously a ton that goes into this. First of all, it was cool to see Tyson Fury bring him in and kind of share that moment with Francis Ngannou in the ring. It felt a lot more real seeing them side by side and stuff like that. But there's still endless hiccups that we have to get through before this can actually be realistic. I mean, Francis Ngannou recently had surgery. He's not able to compete till at least November or December. And then, of course, he's still, technically under UFC contract, and it remains to be seen if they'll be able to figure out an extension. Will the UFC, take him to court and maybe try to drag this thing out so he can't walk and maybe do this on his own? There's a lot of dynamics that go into it. Personally, obviously, if you're looking at Francis Ngannou, the MMA fighter, I want to see him be the UFC heavyweight champion and defend that title against the growing list of compelling contenders from John Jones, Tom Aspinall, all these guys kind of climbing up the ranks that are in that division. I want to see those fights. But if you're looking at Francis Ngannou, the businessman, the person, I want to see him get paid. So if they can make this happen, I'm definitely not opposed to it. Obviously, it would be huge money for Francis Ngannou if he could somehow do this within the UFC context, maybe co-promotion of some sort where he's able to stay fighting with the UFC and then keep that title and do this boxing match and make a bunch of money, kind of like Conor did with Floyd Mayweather. I think that would be the ideal outcome here, but a lot of moving parts to this. It's very far away from becoming a reality, in my opinion. But as of now, I mean, this was definitely an interesting step forward, and I think it kind of complicates the process, and we'll see what happens from here. But a lot of work to do before this comes to fruition.
All right, goes. And before you share your thoughts, I want to add Bob Arum. He's the manager. He represents Tyson Fury, him and Dana in the past, right? But money talks.
Yeah, I think if you look at combat sports in general, right, for the longest time growing up, the heavyweight champion was the man. And now we're in an era where there's two of those, right? Boxing and MMA. So I'm not going to lie, seeing them both stand next to each other, it was interesting for a little bit. You got to remember Tyson Fury's a guy that does get hit quite a bit. He's been put on his ass a few times. And Francis Ngannou has that one-punch knockout type power. So it's interesting for a minute, but then when you think about the logistics, it is really a nightmare. And then when you think about it from like the UFC standpoint, or even mixed martial arts in general, guys, how many of these L's do we want to take before really people start to criticize a little bit what's going on in mixed martial arts? Not everybody gets it, man. Look, if this happens in a cage, Francis Ngannou wins. If it happens in the ring, Tyson Fury wins. If it happens at Costco, I still think Francis Ngannou comes out as the champ there. We all know that, but I think a lot of fans don't look at it that way. You can't take that many L's. I would stay away from something like this.
Yeah, hopefully Matt Erickson is there to capture it on video for us. Danny, so you'll finish up here.
Yeah, I'm about it. I like this fight. I know that obviously boxers will always have an advantage over MMA guys in the ring. There's no doubt about that, but it is heavyweight after all, right? The puncher's chance gets incremented by 1,000, and you had Francis Ngannou as well. Maybe they can work something out with smaller gloves. All of a sudden, it becomes very interesting as well. Also, Ngannou is a striker. Although he did wrestle against Cyril Gane in his last title defense, he is a striker, and he is one of probably the biggest puncher that we've seen in the UFC. So I kind of like this fight. Also, I've always wanted to see a fight between Stipe Miocic and John Jones. That was talked about for the longest time before even Ngannou was even in the picture. And that fight can't happen unless there's an interim title fight on the line, because if they sign Ngannou and he just resumes his title defenses, we're going to get either John Jones or that Stipe Miocic trilogy. So an interim title will kind of allow us to see that one fight. And yeah, so why not make that interim title? The heavyweight belt only gets defended about once per year on average, as we've seen. Why not make that interim title and have Francis Ngannou go box for big money?
All right. And Ngannou did come from boxing. That was his first love. So yeah, I think he's got a little bit more of a head start than other fighters have had in the past. Hey, let's stick with this same topic. Speaking of the sweet science, Bellator featherweight champion Cris Cyborg also talked about wanting to step in the squared circle. She did that after a hard-fought title defense on Saturday night, though it didn't come with an immediate pairing to another boxer per se. Bellator president Scott Coker did make it clear she had it in her contract to she could have boxed at any time. Though now she appears headed for free agency, making things a little bit easier. Is now the time, fellas? Can you get behind this MMA fighter's dream to lace up the boxing gloves? 4 minutes are on the clock. Goes. Start things off.
Man, I feel like if there's anybody in mixed martial arts that deserves to do what they want, it's Cris Cyborg. But man, I'm an MMA fan, and I feel like there's unfinished business in mixed martial arts. There's some big names out there. There's some big fights that you could still put together for Cris Cyborg. So I want her to do mixed martial arts. That being said, I actually feel like Cris would be pretty good at boxing, but she would have to pick one or the other. She'd have to sit down and really work on those mechanics, because she's cut her teeth in MMA being a power puncher. But that's not going to really fly in boxing. You can't do that for too long. And, you know, I feel like there's already proof of what happens when you try and do this. She once tried to do Muay Thai, that lion fight against Yarina Bars. So Yarina Bars is a great Muay Thai practitioner, but she wasn't like at the very top of it, and Yarina Bars defeated her. So I feel like Cris Cyborg would be taking on kind of a lot to do boxing, and then think she's going to be victorious there and come back in mixed martial arts. It's asking a lot from her body. It's a lot asking her for her training, her mind. It's not a good idea. I don't want to see it. I want her to see her stick to mixed martial arts, and some of that unfinished business, guys. There's some big names. I'd like to see her fight those two.
Yeah, and Danny, you're next. You're definitely familiar with one of those names that she could be paired up against. What are your thoughts on this, man? Cyborg, the boxing, yay, nay?
I like it, and I think especially under the circumstances that we currently find ourselves in. I think if Cyborg does become a free agent, obviously a fight with PFL's Kayla Harrison would be awesome, but that season is underway, and we know they stick to the format. So what are you going to do? Pull Kayla from the season, insert Cyborg halfway through? How is that going to go down? So in that sense, if that fight goes down, it would have to wait till later this year or perhaps early next, right? And if she signs again with Bellator, I mean, let's be honest, not so long ago, they were trying to book a second fight with Sinead Kavanagh, who got destroyed in seconds by Cyborg and was coming off a pretty bad knee injury, and they were immediately trying to make that fight again. So look, if she re-signs with Bellator, make a boxing fight and let the contenders kind of start building back up in the division. And if she does go to free agency, still do that boxing fight, because that big fight with PFL's Kayla Harrison's probably going to have to wait a bit longer. And I don't see her re-signing with the UFC. And if there's anyone that can say, hey, I want to do boxing, is Cris Cyborg. I mean, she's done it all. Championship belts in Invicta, Bellator, UFC, Strikeforce. She's done it all. And, you know, she's deep into her career now. She's a striker. She's got power. Clarissa Shields vouches for her. So why not? I'm all in.
And 11 title defenses as well. And to be fair, against the former boxer like Arlene Blanco, she held her own at times. Mike Bond, weigh in.
I guess it just depends where we want to go with this. I mean, I don't mind if Cris Cyborg, now that she seemingly might be on the verge of being completely free from Bellator and a free agent here, she wants to seek out a boxing match, sure. I don't think people are particularly interested in her making this like a career. I don't know what type of opponents are out there that would be sellable fights that we'd really get invested in. But if she wants to take a fight to kind of fulfill that dream she's expressed, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. But as Goes kind of said, I think there is some unfinished business in MMA. I think that's where her legacy stands. A fight between her and Kayla Harrison would be monumental and significant. PFL, if I'm them, I'm doing everything to bring her in and book that fight and make it happen. So some options there for Cyborg. I think she's going to be sought after. If she wants to accomplish that dream of boxing, sure. But I think the priority needs to be MMA. Those are where the biggest fights are. That's where the biggest money is to be made. And that's what's going to elevate her in the sport more so than anything.
Yeah, agreed. And I would never wish injury on anyone, but sometimes fighters have also been brought in through a season because of injury or whatever. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. The lady has options, that's for sure. Topic 3, speaking of Bellator, at their first of 2 back-to-back shows this weekend, Liz Carmouche defeated Juliana Velasquez in the main event at Bellator 278 to become the new Bellator flyweight champion. However, this wasn't without any controversy, as many in the MMA sphere stated that the stoppage by veteran MMA referee Mike Beltran was a bit premature. What was your immediate reaction that night live, fair or foul? And now that we've kind of had the opportunity of rewatching the fight, maybe catching different angles through social media, did any of that change your opinion? All right, Danny, get the party started. 4 minutes. Go.
Yeah, so just to give some context here, I was covering UFC, so I didn't watch the Bellator fights live, but I did catch up after the fact. And so the first thing that I saw was the public reaction, was the outrage on Twitter. And I thought, oh boy, this must have been really, really bad, because everyone is just going wild right now on Twitter over this stoppage. But once I watched the fight again, once I watched the stoppage, I do think there's room for criticism, but there's room for criticism in many things. I don't think it was the worst stoppage. I've seen way worse, way more premature fights that get stopped. And I do think that, the champion in this scenario was put in a bad situation. She was crucifixed by Liz Carmouche. That ground and pound elbows were mean. They were coming clean. She had no way to defend herself. And it's tough to have Liz Carmouche on top of your raining elbows. So I know it was just a short amount of time, and I think that's what people are just waiting to see. Like, hey, let her go out. It's a championship fight. This, that, the other. Maybe she could have escaped. But, man, she was stuck in a terrible position. So, again, not the best stoppage in the world, but I don't think the outrage corresponded with what we actually saw. I think overall that fight was going to be headed that direction. Liz Carmouche did a fantastic job.
Strong points there, Danny. She was in a dominant position, but I think some of what was factoring in also was on 2 judges' scorecards and all the judging at home. Juliana Velasquez was up 3-0. Mike Bond, man, what did you think?
Yeah, things like that, the score of the fight, the time left in the round, I kind of throw that out the window. Referees obviously aren't supposed to take that in consideration when stopping a fight, but I did feel it was early. I mean, we're talking about a championship fight here with an undefeated title holder in Juliana Velasquez. I think she deserved a little more rope. I mean, you see her on Instagram after the fight posting selfies, nary a scratch on her face. So I don't think she was getting badly damaged. Those were short elbows. It was a quick sequence. I agree with Danny completely. It was a terrible position to be in. You don't want to get trapped in that position in any fight, especially a championship fight, but she was there, and I think she deserved a little bit more rope. She basically tried to buck once, was kind of turning her head. She got put back down, and Carmouche threw some elbows, and the referee stopped the fight. I think if that was a male championship fight at the highest level, probably wouldn't have been stopped in that scenario. I thought Velasquez deserved more of an opportunity to try to work out. If she bucks again and she fails and Carmouche keeps hammering her for another 5 seconds, I don't think we're having this conversation. But for me, it was too early.
Goes, I'm familiar with what you thought as we watched the fights together. But now that you've had a chance to watch it again, sure, please.
Yeah, I think it's an unfortunate situation because Bellator has been shadowed by these controversies here as of late. But every sport gets it wrong from time to time, right? Officiating is some of the hardest work you could do in sports. And we all know Mike Beltran's a great referee. Here, I would say it's not the worst stoppage in the world, but I do feel like, and I think my colleagues made great points here, like there was room to work. There was an opportunity where Velasquez, you don't get to this situation, this point in mixed martial arts, if you haven't been put in the worst situations in your life. Right. So she's probably worked this plenty of time. I think she just needed a little bit more time. The elbows, they had some thud on them, but they were kind of short, and I really think a little bit longer leash. I know it's an unwritten rule. I know a lot of people don't like it because they want everything to be consistent, but I do feel like a title fight, it takes a long time to get there, and there's a lot on the line financially and for your legacy. There's a lot there, and I feel like you do need a little bit of a longer leash. I don't think she was in a situation where incredible damage was going to be caused. If I'm the referee that night, I do let it go a little bit longer, but I don't think it's the worst thing we've ever seen.
Yeah, I've watched it plenty of times, man. And only on the last few did I notice one elbow kind of like maybe shut her down a little bit, and then the lights came back on. So yeah, she should have got more of a chance. But what are you going to do? I think they're going to run it back anyway. All right, topic 4. We turn our attention to UFC Fight Night 205, also taking place this past weekend. How about that Jessica Andrade? Holy smokes. Standing arm triangle submission. Just snapped it like a boa constrictor midway through round 1, and it was all over, like they like to say. We're all impressed by the former bantamweight contender, former flyweight title contender, and former strawweight champion. Rare for an MMA fighter to compete well across 3 divisions. Extraordinary, if I'm being honest. In fact, I want to know which male fighter could you compare her to doing that, in that same regard, competitive in 3 divisions. All right, Mike Bond, you're starting it off. Back on you.
Yeah, so to give some numbers here, there's been 13 fighters in UFC history who have wins in 3 weight classes. A few more have tried it, a few have failed, but there's a list of 13 there. Jessica Andrade being the only female in that bunch. But if I kind of look at, someone, obviously there's some very clear candidates, the Conor McGregor's who, is a champion in 2 division, things like that. But someone who kind of reminds me of Andrade's trajectory in a way, but if you kind of flip it around the opposite, is Frankie Edgar. I mean, obviously Andrade started as a bantamweight where she had the least success, and then she dropped all the way down to 115 where she had her most success, and then moved up to 125 where she also challenged for a title and did pretty well there too. Frankie Edgar is someone that was, of course, a extremely undersized champion at the lightweight division, moved down to featherweight and fought for that belt multiple times, and then went to bantamweight. And it was a little bit late in the day. I think we would have rather seen that years earlier, but he was pretty stubborn about it and didn't want to make that move and want to, kind of stay up there. And I think it was a little too late. The results certainly haven't gone his way. Some bad knockouts to Marlon Vera and Corey Sandhagen there. But I think he's a guy that obviously competed at the highest level in those 3 divisions, has won in all 3 divisions. So you can't take that away from Frankie Edgar. I mean, the fact that he did have his most success fighting at lightweight, I think says a lot to me. And the results actually decreased as he moved down, where someone like Andrade, they increased. Is pretty interesting to me. So he's someone that when I think of kind of the 3 division spirit, he's the one that stands out to me.
That was a really good one. Hard act to follow, guys. The stat whiz, Mike Bond coming strong. Goes, you're next.
Well, I'm about to drop a bomb on you guys, primarily an H-bomb. I feel like not very many people did it better than Dan Henderson, who I believe fought as low as like 176 at the start of his career and ended up even taking fights at heavyweight. When you think about the people that he fought, it was the creme de la creme of every organization under different rule sets all over the world, right? So you got Pride. He ended Vanderlei's streak in Pride. He was unstoppable. He stopped them there. Went to Strikeforce and he captured the light heavyweight gold there. And then beating one of the all-time greatest heavyweights in Fedor Emelianenko and heavyweight. He's taken heavyweight fights throughout his career, up and down. It's just been madness. And it's so hard to say that anybody did it better than him, as the guy that started off with a wrestling base, with the Raw team out in California, in Oregon with Team Quest. And now he comes out and he did what he did. It's pretty amazing because he did a lot of it with his hands coming from a wrestling base. So I think you got to put respect on Dan Henderson's name.
Wow, another good one. I love it. And by the way, I saw him recently. He's still at heavyweight. All right, Danny Segura, how about you, man?
Yeah, those are really good options, but I'm going to throw a sneaky one here and go Vanderlei Silva. I know it's maybe a little bit of cheating because when he was fighting in Japan, middleweight meant something a little bit different than it does here in the States with the UFC. But this is someone that fought at heavyweight, man. He fought in open weight Grand Prix tournaments, light heavyweight, middleweight, and had plenty of success. He was really good across weight classes because his power carried through. It was nasty, just like Jessica Andrade. Jessica Andrade can put away girls at 135, 125, and 115. And they also share a pretty similar style. I would say that Jessica Andrade is somewhat of a female Vanderlei Silva in the sense that, she's stocky, she's compact, she swings wild hooks, she cracks pretty hard. and clearly, obviously, a very decorated fighter as well, who's had plenty of success, with the title contenders and at championship level, especially at 115, becoming champion. So it's kind of tough to put exactly a single person because Jessica Andrade is doing unprecedented stuff. But certainly, if I had to pick somebody, I'm going to go with another Brazilian in Vanderlei Silva.
Awesome stuff, guys. In the history of SBC, that might be the best. 1, 2, 3. Hats off to you guys. All right, but we still got one more topic. Don't pop the champagne yet. I might still be giving out some yellow cards. Closing out this week with Conor McGregor, of course, who has said he's going to walk right back into a welterweight title shot against Kamaru Usman. But this week, Joe Rogan poured some cold water on that idea by suggesting that McGregor should have a tune-up fight against someone, quote, a little below championship level. So do you guys like this idea? And who would be your pick for the Conor McGregor tune-up fight? 4 minutes are on the clock. Goes. You're up.
I think Joe Rogan's spot on here. But no matter how you look at it, you really are rolling the dice. The UFC has to look out for their business. But when you think about it, Conor McGregor is their own little side business that really feeds into the big business. So you have to be very careful with what you decide and who you're going to go with. I picture this wall with all these different scenarios because you have to remember, for this to work, he needs to win fights. You always have the ace up the hole going over to Nate Diaz. You could always pull that out, but this guy has to keep winning. And then that's like your last case scenario. And a guy like Kamaru Usman, it's not going to take it easy on you. That is a tough guy. And if they fought, more than likely, if Kamaru Usman wins, it's going to be a finish. And it's going to be hard to take Conor McGregor serious after that. So I think if you're going to do this, you got to have that test, and it's got to be at 170. There are no layups at 170. There are no layups at 155. So really what I think you have to do is maybe cater a little bit to Conor's style, give him a chance to maybe knock someone out. I think this is no disrespect to this guy, but I think Vicente Luque might play Conor McGregor's type of game. I think he might get in his face. And then it just comes down to, hey, do what you do best, right? That big left hand and hope he lands it. And then from there you could build off of that. But really, I don't think he wants a piece of Kamaru Usman. I don't know that very many people do.
All right. Danny Segura, you're up next. You got a viable tune-up name for us for old Connie Mack?
Yeah, I got a couple, and I agree with what Goes was saying here. Like, Joe Rogan's spot on. Conor McGregor 100% needs a tune-up fight. He's gonna sell regardless, but if you add winning to the recipe, he's gonna sell even more. So I do think he needs a tune-up fight. Plus, he struggled, let's be honest, in these last few years of his career. So in order to get back on the horse and get some momentum behind, give him somebody that's not championship level. Kamaru Usman is going to be a bad idea regardless of whether or not he has a tune-up fight, but a tune-up fight would certainly help a lot, at least in the public eye. So if it's at 170, I think the Nate Diaz fight makes a lot of sense. He's obviously not championship level. He's in his mid-30s now, I believe. And, someone that's not even ranked in any division at 170 or 155. They're one-on-one. Conor McGregor proved that he could beat Nate Diaz in that rematch, so he already knows that it's possible to beat him, and it's a big fight. So I think that's actually a tune-up fight for him, if there is such thing in the UFC. Another fight that I'd like to suggest is another colorful and very big personality, Bobby Green. I know that's at 155, and Conor McGregor's angling 170, but just bring him back up. Bring Bobby Green up to the welterweight division. I think that would be one hell of a build-up because both guys can cut promos. Style-wise, they're both fun strikers that primarily like to box. So why not? I think those two options are good tune-up fights for Conor McGregor.
I love them all. Mike Bond, finish strong.
Yeah, I agree with the air quotes from Danny because, the spirit of this question, obviously, there's not a real tune-up fight in the UFC. And with Conor McGregor, it's such a massive investment to booking his fights that it it's pretty risky to put him in there with anyone, especially hoping that's going to be a bridge to something else, like a big championship fight or whatever. So, there's not too many guys I can look at right now that say, hey, Conor McGregor can definitely beat that guy, unless you want to go way, way down the rankings and someone that you just pull from the roster that you think he can certainly beat. That's a favorable style matchup. But if you kind of look around at, what they did with the Cerrone fight and who's available, I think Conor should take a pretty close look at this Michael Chandler versus Tony Ferguson fight coming up at UFC 274. There's a history with Tony Ferguson in particular. Both those guys have fought at 170. Michael Chandler, I think, would give Conor McGregor the type of fight he'd look for. So I think that's a matchup that, regardless of whether it's the winner or the loser, just whatever makes the most sense, I think you could do that one. And obviously, you know, not a gimme by any means. I think Conor could definitely lose to either of those guys, but I think he could win as well. So I'd target that fight if I was him.
Great stuff, guys. And if I may throw one in there, I'm thinking Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He doesn't like to go to the ground. He's a welterweight, kind of not undersized, but you know, not like the biggest guy out there. So any of them would do, man. Those would all be great. Let me pay off this bet here for Danny Segura. You got us a few weeks ago. And folks, every week you got us, the Spinning Back Clique crew. We'll be back with you guys next week. Keep it locked on MMA Junkie throughout the week. Take care.